This is BBC Tea. So it's 8 minutes past 2. Fleetwood Mac from the album Tango in the Night. And our After 2 guest is here. A very full and eventful life so far. Main priority now, I think, is the RNLI at the Redcar lifeboat. But who knows, I might be completely wrong. Dave Cox is our After 2 guest. Dave, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for asking me, John. Delighted to be here.
Redcar lad. We've heard you quite a few times on BBC Teas through the years. You are a bit of a media celebrity, it has to be said.
I don't know about celebrity, John.
Media mogul.
Media mogul. Yeah, if I could have a media mogul's money, that would be wonderful. Yeah, I do a lot of talking on behalf of the volunteers at the lifeboat station at Redcar. My primary role at the lifeboat station is operational. I'm one of the launching authorities, but nobody gets just one job in the RNLI. If you're really good at anything, you'll get two jobs. And my second job is to tell guys like yourselves what our volunteers have been doing, because otherwise people just don't know what's been going on.
So if you do your job well, you get an extra task to do. Actually, you're multitasking, really.
Multitasking. I've got one of those special watches that has 30 hours in the day, so that's what gets me through.
Must be long hours, is it, with the RNLI?
It can be. There are certain routine things that the guys do every week. Wednesday evenings is always training. Sunday mornings is always training. Then there's the call-outs. Then there's the bits and pieces in between. I do a lot of talks to groups as well, which fill in a lot of evenings. So it's a way of promoting the interest and ultimately the fundraising for the RNLI.
That's it. A lot of people forget it's all... the way that the lifeboat is run and the RNLI, it's all through donations.
It's all through donations. The RNLI is a charity. The crews are volunteers, and the real heroes of the RNLI, we say, are always those that do the fundraising for us.
Is that tough in this day and age? We've had people on from various other charities and hospices on the show, and it's been well documented in the news as well that times are tough at the moment for quite a few people.
It is hard. It's hard for all charities, and the RNLI are particularly hard hit, I think, because much of what we do has consumable things like fuel, and the cost of fuel's gone up many, many times, as we all know, when we go to the filling station, and that's our big single cost, and that's just about double to £2 million a year. So without doing anything else, we need to cover that extra cost before we even start thinking about buying new lifeboats.
And that's just for Redcar?
Well,
£2 million for Redcar?
No, that's for the whole of the RNLI. That's the 235 stations that we have around the coast. It's a big organisation. We save 8,000 lives a year. There's 9,000 lifeboat launches, and they have to be paid for. And it's the volunteers that raise the money. It's the people that write the wills and kindly think of the RNLI that provide all that funding.
Do you ever worry that you're not going to meet the targets?
We're always worried. And that way we keep sharp, and we do find innovative ways of raising money. Over the last 5 or 6 years, the RNLI started having a national fundraising day, which is called the SOS Day, which is always the last Friday in January, and that's a way of nationally publicising our need for money. Like all of the charities, we need money all the time to operate. We're not an operation that we can just say, right, well, we only do Monday to Friday. We've got to keep going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So how much does it cost then, for instance, to keep Redcar going?
Well, it depends how busy we are, but if you think of, for example, the lifeboat launching with a crew of 3 going down to Saltburn to rescue some people trapped by the tide at the cliffs there, for example, then the real cost is just the fuel that's expended going between here and there and back again. But new lifeboats cost anything up to £4 million. So that's the scale of things. At one end, it's a pair of welly boots for £16, say, and at the other end of the scale, it's buying a new lifeboat or building a new lifeboat station that runs into millions of pounds.
The volunteers, of which you are one, obviously, are amazing. What was the draw for you to do something with the RNLI?
Well, for me, it was easy. I'm second generation. My father was a lifeboatman for 20 years, so my first job with the RNLI, I was about 5 years old. And I used to go with him on a Sunday morning and polish the brass propellers on the old wooden-hulled 8-knot lifeboat. That was my real treat, to go and spend the day polishing the props. So I've grown up with it. But I think if you lined up 100 lifeboat volunteers and asked them why you did it, you'd get 100 different answers.
Because it is one of those jobs. Why would you put yourself in danger? Which is essentially what lifeboats crews do. Whenever they go out, they are putting themselves at an element of risk.
There's an element of risk sometimes, but what you've got to realise that these days the RNLI lifeboats are second to none in the world. The equipment that they provide, the personal equipment, the protective equipment that they provide is absolutely fantastic. And more than anything, the training and the will to help in the crew themselves is what keeps the whole organisation going at the sharp end, at the wet end of the RNLI.
Do you think the RNLI is slightly overlooked?
It's probably underestimated and misunderstood to some extent.
Taken for granted?
A lot of people do take it for granted, and a lot of people think that it is an emergency service funded by the government the same way that all the other emergency services are funded. And a lot of people are surprised when they realise that the crews are unpaid and that all the money is through donation and subscription.
Do you wish that the government did something?
Well, that's always been a thorny subject, and the RNLI is very, very proud of the way it runs its own business. And I think unless it got into real dire straits and had to have money from the government and therefore influence from the government, I think we'd quite nicely just try to stand on our own 2 feet and make our own efforts to raise the money that we need.
That's a very, very good answer. The lifeboat station at Redcar is steeped in history, of course, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we go back to 1802. It's one of the earliest lifeboat stations in the United Kingdom, and Redcar very proudly is the home of the world's oldest surviving lifeboat, the Zetland. Grand old lady, she's 210 years old this year.
And the current... how do you get... I want to get the right terminology here. Is it a ship? Is it a boat or what?
It's a boat.
Thank you. I want to get it right.
Ships carry boats. That's the way we say it. So yes, the current boat, the Atlantic 75 lifeboat, that came in the year 2000 or thereabouts. She's 11, 12 years old, and in fact, just next week, she's to be replaced with a bigger, more well-equipped lifeboat for us at Redcar.
So you're getting a brand new lifeboat at Redcar?
Absolutely brand new lifeboat. It's going to be called Leicester Challenge 3, which maintains the strong link that Redcar has with the people of Leicester, who paid for Leicester Challenge 2 that we've got now, and paid for Leicester Challenge that we got in 1990.
And what type of boat is this?
It's called an Atlantic 85 class lifeboat. She's about 8.5 metres long. She carries a crew of 4. She's capable of about 36, 38 knots, so you're talking about over 40 miles an hour, which is fast enough when there's all those holes in the road out there in the North Sea. She carries radar. She's a better equipped boat and designed for 21st century rescue.
So Christmas Day comes next week to Redcar?
Yes, in fact, it comes on Wednesday, which is my birthday, so that's my birthday present.
How exciting is it to get a new bit of kit like the fundamental thing that you need if you're at the RNLI? That must be... well, it doesn't happen every year, does it?
It doesn't happen every year. It doesn't happen every day. And for Redcar, we're very, very, very proud. For that one day on Wednesday, Redcar will honestly be able to say that it has the newest lifeboat in the world and the oldest lifeboat in the world within 200 yards of each other.
That's fantastic. Right, we'll come back in a minute here at BBC Tees. I will talk some more today. We've got a few of his favourites as well. First, how are we doing out and about on the road? Simon.
Hello, John. Elwood Road to Hamilton.
Dire Straits and Money for Nothing. Chance of, choice of Dave Cox here at BBC Tees, our After Two guest. Why Dire Straits? Is there any sort of connection with work or something? Or?
Well, there's no connection, but I just love that guitar intro. I haven't got a musical bone in my body, and if I was going to be able to play the guitar, that's the sort of guitar that I'd love to be able to play. It just makes me tingle every time I hear it, and it's brilliant.
But you can't play a musical instrument now,
I can't bang 2 tin cans together, I'm afraid. My youngest son has developed a bit of a musical talent. He taught himself to play the keyboard very young. He played guitar in a band. In fact, he played in the band. They're a very local, talented young lady, Evelyn Burke, used to sing in. Mm-hmm. When she becomes famous, I'm going to say that she practiced in my front room.
Well, there's your claim to fame. So, when you were growing up as a Redcar lad, music was out of the window straight away. You had no aspirations to be a pop star or anything like that, or play any sort of musical instrument, because you said, I can't do this. So what did you want to do then when you were growing up?
Well, as I was growing up, I wanted to do lots of things like lots of people did for a lot of years. I wanted to become a marine engineer like my Uncle Pat. He was a ship's engineer, and he sailed the world, and he used to come back and he used to stay with us in our family home when he was ashore, and he used to have in his bedroom all these pennants from wonderful exotic places around the world. Yeah. Places like Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and I used to dream of having the life like he had, but he persuaded me not to follow that life because it's quite nomadic. After that, I probably...
But that would have been good, wouldn't it?
Well, I would have
travelling the world.
Absolutely right. But as he says, you're just down in an engine room and you don't know where you are.
I suppose that does kill it off a bit then, does it?
Exactly, yeah. So then I thought about being a journalist for a little while.
No money in that.
No money in that, but I was good at English, so I thought, well, maybe that would suit me fine. And in the end, I sort of followed a science route. And when I did my O-levels, did my A-levels, I ended up doing a degree in chemistry and biochemistry way down in Huddersfield, at Huddersfield Polytechnic as it was then.
Wow, get you. So a bit different.
A little bit different. How I ended up in the steel industry still baffles me.
So you were doing these courses down in Yorkshire. What was university life like then for you?
Loved it. All the friends that I made there are still good friends. One of the guys that was my friend, he was my best friend. I was his best man. I was his... So we sort of, in the formative years, that's where we made really good, strong friends, and we keep in touch with everybody, and it's really good.
So if you were doing chemistry and biochemistry then at university, Why did you end up in the steelworks? Is this a question you ponder?
Well, I do sometimes ponder, but maybe it was just kismet. Maybe it was meant to be. I applied for 3 jobs in my final year while I was doing my degree, and I was offered all 3 jobs. I was offered a job down in Silvertown in London, working for a paint company, which I didn't really fancy. I was offered a job with Corning in Sunderland, and as a Teesside lad, I found that a bit difficult to swallow. And I was offered a position in the British Steel Corporation, as it was then, on the new, just opening Redcar site as it was in 1978.
So you followed the traditional path then for a lot of your contemporaries.
Quite accidentally, yes, that's right, I did.
Straight into the industry that has made Teesside famous the world over.
Exactly.
What was it like stepping through those gates at Redcar for the first time, knowing that there were, goodness knows, how many tens of thousands of people working there?
Well, when I joined in 1978, there was 32,000 people working in the steel industry on Teesside, and my very first day was, happily for me, on the blast furnaces at Clay Lane at South Bank. So I actually saw molten iron on the very first day I joined the industry, and I think I was hooked that day. That was what drew me in.
So what is it? What is it about it then?
Oh, I find it hard to describe it without getting not exactly emotional, but getting quite poetic, really, because the blast furnace process, which is really where I come from, we take iron ore out of the ground that's been there 4.5 billion years, and over a period of about 8 hours, we turn it into a living, breathing, molten iron with life and heat and fire in it. And there's just something about that. It's primitive instincts. It's the earth, air, fire and water of primitive man. That's been part of all my life, particularly on the blast furnace.
Was it an eye-opener for you when you went through the door?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I had no impression whatsoever what iron and steel making was going to be like. I'd applied for the job because Teesside was a local company, so I applied and got in. And I really don't know what I was expecting to see when I went through those doors. I didn't know whether it was going to be a little factory or what it is in reality, which is 35 square miles. It's a big factory of 35 square miles, effectively.
People don't get to see that part, do they? For obvious reasons. But when you go beyond the gates, and there's the hill and the train track, which is, has got the passionate people, passionate places thing, I think is still on it. When you go down the other side from there, there is just this vast, open bit of land, which is all there for the steel making process, and the chemicals are on the other side of the road. It is vast, and the only way you can see it's from the air, really, isn't it?
It is vast, and in fact, when you think about what the original plan for Teesside was, because in the early 1970s, when they actually started marking out the ground, there was going to be 3 blast furnaces, there was going to be 2 sinter plants, lots more coke ovens. It was going to be 3 times the size. If they'd followed that plan, then Teesside would have been a phenomenal force in the iron and steel making world. Unfortunately, the energy crises of the 1970s knocked that on the head, and plans were scaled right back, and we ended up with the site that we had, which was 1 blast furnace making 10,000 tonnes a day. It could have been 30,000 tonnes a day of iron and steel being produced on Teesside if they'd stuck to the original plan.
Some money in your pocket, young lad, a career ahead of you, you've already got your degree, got a good pension. Was it everything it was cracked up to be at the time?
Initially, yes, because for me it was a brave new world. It was very exciting, lots of new things to learn, particularly when I actually went and worked on the blast furnace itself. Every day was different. As I've said, the blast furnace is very much like a living creature, and it depends on what side of the bed it got out of that morning as to what sort of day we were going to have. Some days it was just very routine, mundane. Other days it was real technical challenges to get the plant, the process back on track to deliver what it was there to deliver, which was iron of a certain quality to the steelmakers.
Was it exciting?
Yes, it is exciting.
An exciting life. Tough life. You're not sat behind a desk, you're not operating a computer, you're there. It's very physical work, labour intensive. Is it exciting?
It is exciting. Sometimes it really is a battle against the elements almost, because when a blast furnace goes wrong, and I don't mean dangerously wrong, but when a blast furnace goes wrong and things need to be corrected, you're thinking on your feet, you're dealing with something that's coming out of the blast furnace almost continuously, molten iron coming out at about 6 tonnes a minute from the blast furnace. If it isn't right, if there's a problem with that process, you've got to think on your feet and get it put right as quickly as possible.
I suppose one of the thrills must be that when you see some steel come out, you think, that's going to be the next Sydney Harbour Bridge, that's going to go to this part of the world, we're making this big structure down in London, which is going to be a landmark, and we're building it.
Exactly right. I'm not exactly a steel anorak, but I remember going down into Churchill's war rooms near Downing Street.
I know what you're going to say.
And as soon as you get down there, the first thing that is staring you in the face is Dorman Long embossed in all those girders. Now I think that's brilliant.
The red girders.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and we played our part during the Second World War. You were at the Steelworks for how many years?
31 years.
You're not there anymore now.
No.
Was it a wrench to leave?
It was a wrench. It was a terrible, terrible wrench. The time bomb had been ticking for a few months before we actually found out that the place was going to close. But when it came, it was quite a surprise even so. In fact, the announcement was made on a Friday morning. The Wednesday and the Thursday before that, I was at the Chorus headquarters in London sorting out all the raw materials purchasing for the next year for the blast furnace. So it came completely out of the blue when the announcement was made. But we had been under threat for quite a number of months, and in fact a number of years before the announcement was finally made. But when it was actually said that this is really going to happen, then of course it stings terribly.
So you were there in London, you were sorting everything out for the next year, purchasing, and there was absolutely no inkling at all.
Nothing on the radar at all. I was actually sitting underneath the people that must have been at that very moment making that decision. I was on the next floor down.
So when the announcement came then, everybody was just completely stunned.
It was blank looks. It was. People just didn't quite know how to take in what we'd just been told. Teesside was going to close. It's bad enough being told that you're going to lose your job, but to have something that's the cornerstone of the community for the last 150 years, possibly coming to an end as it seemed at the time, then yeah, it really was just stunned silence.
We're going to come back. We'll talk to Dave some more. We've got a few more of his favourites here at BBC Tees. I'd like to just talk a little bit more about that episode, which we all lived through, which was a very traumatic 18 months, 2 years plus, no doubt. And hopefully the end is in sight now. We'll come back and talk to Dave again in just a moment here at BBC Tees. We've got a couple more of his choices as well. Also a bit more about the RNLI too, because there's one or two bits and pieces I'd like to ask Dave about that and about himself, how he switches off. Or if you're in the RNLI, do you never switch off?
North Yorkshire, County Durham, Teesside.
25 to 3 is the time here at BBC Tees. And our after two guest today is Dave Cox, who was at the Steel Works for 30-odd years. Man and boy. That period, how do you think history will judge that period when we found out that steelmaking was going to come to an end? We remember where we were when we heard the announcement in this building, certainly, and then subsequent rumours, counter-rumours, the day that the furnace was switched off, the brass band playing outside the gates. I've been stood outside those gates in everything. Thick fog, snow, rain, hail, the lot. How do you think history will judge that period?
I hope that in the history of ironmaking and steelmaking on Teesside, that the period 2010 to 2012 is a chapter with one paragraph in it that says, and for a short period of time, operations at Teesside were interrupted. I hope that there'll be another 150 years of history to be written ahead of that. I hope that this last 2 years will soon be forgotten, to be honest.
Be honest. Did you know that everything would be all right in the long run? It was very painful. I'm not disputing that, and there were uncertain times. But some of the people that we've spoken to were involved in that episode, and even people in the media always had something in the back of their mind that said, it's going to be okay.
There was a belief, I suppose, that the decision to stop Teesside operations was wrong. Not so much for the politics or the business, but just the fact that steel industry needs to exist in this country. Manufacturing needs to exist in this country. And I'm sure it was just a quirk of time that SSI weren't on board a year earlier, and perhaps Teesside could have been taken over as a going concern. I'm sure that SSI, without knowing, because I don't know, but I'm sure SSI must have been working in the background all the time, maybe trying to get the deal, get the finance sorted before that closure happened, because to restart the steelworks is far more difficult than to take it over. So I'm sure they would have worked that out and would have wanted to have taken the business on as a going concern. So, for whatever reason, the decision makers decided that Teesside would have to stop its operations and people would have to leave. And that must have made the task for SSI very, very difficult. And it must have perhaps even made SSI wonder whether it was still worth doing. The fact that they have done it speaks volumes for their commitment and their enthusiasm to get operations going again in this area.
What about you and your work colleagues? You said, stunned when you found out that it was actually going to be switched off and it was going to stop. When that day came, what was that like?
Well, for me, it was a very busy time. I was at work for 36 hours because I unfortunately, was in charge of the team that did the...
You had the key, didn't you, basically?
Well, I had the blast furnace shut down to do. I didn't do the whole thing, and I certainly wasn't the decision maker, by the way. But I had to shut the blast furnace down, so it just seemed right that I was there for the full period of time. I was just going to be working the night shift, as it happens, but I didn't want to leave. I wanted to be there till that button was pressed that closed the final valve that actually said that the blast furnace was now off. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be part of that. I had to be part of that.
What was it like?
Very sad. There was tears. There was tears. Big grown men were crying in the control room. There were tears. It was difficult.
When whoever pressed that button, was it as simple as that? As you just said, it was just a big button on the desk. You press that, and then it just stops it.
That's it. The final stage is to close one big valve that isolates the air blast from the blast furnace. Once that valve's closed, that's it. And it is. It's just as you described, John. It's a big red button. You press that button. You watch the indicators on the panel, and the lights went from open to closed, and that said Teesside had stopped.
And who pressed the button?
It was the team leader on the day. It was a guy called Davy Hunter.
And obviously visibly upset by doing it.
Everybody was. But we had a job to do, because what we were trying to do was give the blast furnace as soft a landing as we possibly could. We wanted to leave that plant in a position where it could be restarted. We weren't just going to slam the door shut and walk away. After we'd done the shutdown, I stayed back for about 6 weeks, and all I was doing was writing the dummy's guide to blast furnaces, just in case somebody did come along, would break the glass and take out that emergency book that would tell you how to operate a blast furnace. We had to do that. We wanted to preserve the knowledge and the experience for that next generation of ironmakers.
I dare say when that button was pressed and, as you said there, the valves go down and the indicators shut down, it was silent.
It was silent. It was very, very silent.
Drop.
Even though there's things to do after that, it was almost like a freeze frame just for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, where people thought, crikey, that is it. We've done it.
A lot of people worked incredibly hard behind the scenes. A lot of people worked incredibly hard in the public eye, who were the go-betweens between what was happening at the steel plant and also with the media. And everybody played an important part. Everybody was really pulling together for this. And there's some people who will never know just what role they played. But in a perverse sort of way, that must have been an exciting time as well, when you saw things were maybe slowly starting to move. The wheel had started to turn again. There was something on the horizon. No one could say what it was, but there was something. And different rumours start flying backwards and forwards. That must be an exciting time too, is it?
Well, it was. I mean, it is the old cliche phrase, there was light at the end of the tunnel. All of a sudden, those dark days of Teesside not having iron and steel making for the first time in 150, 160 years, there was that glimmer, the little flicker, and it was almost symbolic, actually, because after I left in the March of 2010, in the October of 2010, I got a phone call from SSI who said, Dave, because of your experience, because of your knowledge, will you come back and help us shape up what we're looking for in terms of what we're going to be buying, what we're going to need to repair, and what needs to be refurbished and enhanced before we would take this plant on and restart it. So I did go back into the steel industry for about 5 months, and literally during the time that I was there was literally still a little flame inside the blast furnace. There was still enough heat inside the coke that was left inside there to give us a little flicker of flame, and that was almost a little flicker of hope for Teesside, and that stayed lit until the blast furnace was quenched as it normally is quenched at the start of the happy days of doing a reline, a repair, ready to come back online. So that flame didn't want to go away, so why should Teesside steelmaking go away?
People like David Reed, who was brought in, who became a good friend of the radio station here, who worked on Teesside before. Obviously, people like yourself, Jeff Waterfield, of course, and all the MPs. Whether you agree with their politics or not, they were all pulling together, weren't they? It was looking back at that time, that was a tremendous time to be in the area.
It was, and the common purpose was the passion that everybody had through different angles of different perceptions, but everybody had that same passion to get Teesside going again. You can't ignore the fact that because of the Eston Hills, because of the River Tees, because of the Durham coal mines, Teesside is the natural home for ironmaking and steelmaking in this area. It had to be here, and that common passion came out of everybody and took us along in the same direction. It was fantastic.
So between you leaving the steelworks and getting that phone call to go back and help out, if you want, for the next 5 months. What did you do with your time?
Well, I did then what I still do now, actually. I was extremely lucky. I had about 4 weeks off where I just really got my head around what we'd just been through, because my time, the last few months in the industry weren't just the technical challenges. I personally had to make 50 guys redundant before I was personally made redundant. So that was a very difficult thing to do. We had to go through the script and each guy face to face, tell them that horrible last paragraph. It falls upon me to tell you that your contract of employment is terminated by reason of redundancy. I had to do that 50 times. So when I finally left, I was glad to get away from all of that and just sit and stare at the walls for a few weeks, to be honest, and get over that. And then talk about somebody looking after you. I have been trained as a first aid instructor for many years. I'm very highly qualified because of the skills and experience that I've gained from the RNLI, and a local offshore survival centre just happened to advertise in the Gazette for a part-time first aid instructor.
So you got the job.
So I went to see them. I saw them on a Wednesday. By the time I got home on that Wednesday, the phone was ringing, and by the next Monday I was there starting to work for them. And that's what I do now. I work part-time as an instructor at the offshore survival centre at Haverton Hill.
Telling people that they're no longer required is one of the most difficult things I think anybody's ever got to do. I know somebody who had to make one person redundant and was physically sick for the day before, didn't get any night's sleep, because all he could think about was the family, the kids, etc., in the background. To do it 50 times.
Yeah. The first few times I was shaking like a leaf. It was very, very hard. And I didn't get used to it, and it didn't become routine, but I sort of built a little defence mechanism around me, and I stuck to the script that we had to follow because of all the legalities of it and that sort of thing. And what I used to do at the end of it is I would sort of switch the tape recorders off, if you like, and I would have a personal talk with the guys, and that would help. And in fact, I'm sorry I'm laughing, but it's not because the whole situation was funny, but at the end of one of these scripted falls upon me sort of moments, at the end of it, the guy stood up, shook me by the hand and said, "Dave, I couldn't have been made redundant any nicer."
Now we have the light at the end of the tunnel. You said that flame didn't want to go off inside. It was still beating, if ever so slowly and ever so quietly. We're expecting the new dawn very soon. Is the part of you that thinks, it would be good to go back? I'm not saying you don't enjoy the job you do now and get satisfaction, but when you go down the trunk road and you look and you see the blast, do you think, there it is? I know everything about that.
It's funny you should say that, John, because when you drive from Redcar, at Cowie's Corner as we call it, down towards the Dormanstown roundabout, there's a couple of gaps in the landscaping where you can see the blast furnace. I used to look through those gaps every day for 31 years, and I still look. And I still look to see, is the plant on, is the plant off, what are they doing to my little baby? So yes, my heart says I'd love to go back. My head says that if I did go back, it would only be for a couple of years. I might have to sacrifice this very nice, convenient way that I can live my life now, working part-time. It's a great organisation that I'm working for the most part, at the Offshore Survival Centre. I love doing what I do there. So I had to make a head over heart decision, and that said, really, I've got to stay away. But I still keep in touch. I keep in touch with the guys very, very regularly. I'm very interested. They've had a bit of free advice once or twice as well. But I'm happy to do that. I'm really happy to do that because I want to see that plant going again.
And when it does come back on, and we do see the smoke coming from it, etc., and the steam, rather, there'll be, again, a lot of tears, no doubt.
Oh, I'm sure there will be. There'll be but tears of joy, of course. And as long as the guys don't think that the job's done there, because running a blast furnace is just as hard as starting a blast furnace. The guys that have never been in the industry have never seen iron and steel yet. Once they start to see that and see what it can do to you, then there'll be more challenges and there'll be more reasons for people to really concentrate on what they're doing, because it's not a hostile environment if things go well, but if it doesn't go well, then it can be quite hostile. And you've got to be a certain mindset, you've got to be a certain character to be able to cope with that. So I hope that all these new guys that have never seen iron and steel see it and stick with it, because it's a privilege to work in the steel industry.
Let's come back in a minute. 14 minutes to 3. This is BBC Tea. Let's get the latest down on Monday morning from 6. 13 minutes to 3. Let's finish up our chat with Dave Cox. So you're doing this job at Haverton Hill. Again, something that we're internationally recognised for, the survival. That must be a tremendous privilege, but also a real eye-opener just how technology is advancing all the time, and coupled with the RNLI work that you do as well, the sea is pretty much most of your life now, isn't it?
It has been most of my life, and it is very interesting in the area that I'm working over at Haverton Hill there. It's been interesting to see just in the last 12 months, for example, how the renewable energies industry has expanded, and hopefully that will rub off on Teesside, the old shipbuilding skills, all the welders and platers and that sort of trade. I'm hoping that they will benefit from what is obviously a rapidly expanding area of work and an area of engineering. Probably 3/4 of the people that I teach first aid to now are in the wind turbine sort of business rather than the traditional oil and gas industry. It's a massive expanding part of the sector.
Okay, well, you know, we've had some news today which hasn't been good about Hartlepool Moor with Neil after 4 o'clock on that. But of course we keep our fingers crossed for the future. Do you ever switch off then?
Do I ever switch
I mean,
off?
you have your RNLI polo shirt on, like we said. Do you have your pager with you? Is there a bleep that you have?
Yes, I'm carrying a page. I've turned it off just in case, because I wouldn't want to disappear too quickly. Yes, I do switch off. We have a golden retriever, and my wife and I love to have big walks in the countryside. I do a little bit of photography, very amateur, but I do a little bit of photography. So yes, and I do like to get away from the sea sometimes. I quite like being up at the top of Rosebery Topping and in the hills. But I do find myself getting drawn to walks that just happen to go past the old iron ore mines and the old railway lines. It just seems to be that you can't shake it off somehow.
When your pager goes off, this is something I've always wanted to ask somebody at the RNLI. Is it a sense of adrenaline?
Yes, there is. Not frantic wide-eyed adrenaline, but it does mean you've got to switch on. When that pager goes off at 3 o'clock on a November morning and there's rain's lashing against the window and most people will be pulling the duvets up, we're throwing the duvet back. You've got to wake up, you've got to switch on, and you've got to be professional. It's a voluntary organisation, but it is a very professionally run and trained organisation. So that means being alert, because once the crew arrive at the station and have kitted up and the lifeboat's in the sea, there's only them, the boat and the elements. So you've got to be switched on, you can't be half asleep, and you can't be complacent. The sea's your best friend, but it's your worst enemy in that sort of situation. So you've got to respect it, and you've got to be alert and switched on to do that.
And how are we in this part of the country, on the coast? We hear about the tide rapidly coming in. Is people getting cut off? Is that the main amount of jobs that you go to in the year?
It's not the main one, but I suppose it's the one that really is a thorn in our side, because it's such a simple thing that you can do to keep yourself safe and avoid becoming another victim that needs to be rescued by the RNLI. All you've got to do is check the tide times. You just got to understand that the sea goes out and then it comes back in again. It doesn't go out and stay out. So if you're walking on rocks now, eventually those rocks are going to be covered by the sea. And it's just a case of checking the tide times and allowing a bit of leeway so that you know that you can get to a place of safety before the tide comes in and creates another RNLI job.
It's difficult to phrase this one, but I'll just say it anyway. What is not the best, but I know that you're going to understand how I'm going to say this. Shout that you've been on where you've thought, my goodness me, this is something else. You know, has it been a ship in distress? Has it been somebody, cut off in a really, really obscure place where you've really had to think on your feet and think, how are we going to do this one? This isn't in any textbook. This isn't in anything. There must have been a couple of occasions like that where it's been all hands to the deck and what are we going to do here?
A lot of jobs are like that, to be honest, that you can't go to sea in a lifeboat and just follow the instructions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Every job is very different. The job that always will stick in my mind is the first time I know that I saved a life. It goes back to about 1980. It was a young guy who turned out to be a young teacher. And he'd been canoeing around the Saltburn area. His canoe had capsized in some very nasty weather. The lifeboat launch was it was the inshore lifeboat, the small rubber duck as we call it. It was myself as crew member and a guy called Paul Wilson was driving the boat. He was the helmsman. And we had to search and search and search for this guy. And in amongst all that, one of those really freak chances, we came up on one wave. This guy in the water came up on another wave, so we knew where he was. We went across to him. And as I reached down and as I took hold of his hand, he was looking past me. He was looking up to the heavens. He had decided that he was on his way out, and I had decided that he wasn't. And for me, that will always stick as being the most special rescue that I've ever done. It was the first life that I can honestly say I saved. He was a young teacher, so I'd like to think for the next 30 years, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children have benefited from really what I did in pulling that guy out of the sea that day so that he could continue to live his life.
I suppose it wasn't until after you'd done that, you'd got back to land, that you realised what you'd done.
Exactly. When you do the job, you do the job, and it's often during the debrief. There's always paperwork with any rescue, and when you start debriefing the crews and taking the details down for the record of that rescue that they've done, often the guys themselves say, "Oh, crikey, yeah, that was a bit interesting, that one, wasn't it?" And it's only because at the time they're focused on the task in hand, they're following the training, they're using the kit that they've got, and it's afterwards when it does sink in that you think, well, that was a bit of a snotty job, that was a bit difficult, that job. We did all right there, didn't we?
Highs. What have been some of the highs? If you look back across your life so far, that is obviously one of the big highs. Are there any others?
Professionally, achieving what we did with the blast furnace, and personally, got a wonderful wife, 2 great kids.
What more could you ask for?
Exactly.
You better switch your pager back on.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming in. Great news, and we told you about that earlier. Bit of an exclusive here at BBCT's new lifeboat for Redcar, and it's going to be in very soon.
It'll come next week, and by Friday the crew will be worked up on it, and then there's a chance for people to come and have a look, maybe.
All right. And, of course, you're always looking for people to raise funds. You're always looking for a bit of extra money to go into the pot. If anybody's got any fundraising ideas, and it doesn't matter if they're the most ridiculous thing going, because you've seen it, and you've probably done it all as well, Dave. It goes without saying, people get in touch with the RNLI at Redcar, or their local RNLI station, wherever they may be.
Please do.
Thanks for coming in. It's been great to talk to you. Good luck with the new lifeboat, and thanks for sharing your story with us this afternoon. This is BBCT's